Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
10 days ago, William Shatner, Jewish, actually a cousin of mine, from second cousin by marriage, the actor who played Captain Kirk, right, as we all know on Star Trek, became the oldest person ever to be launched into space. He was 90 years old. I'm not sure how many of you saw this, but when he landed and he emerged out of the shuttle, he gave this very moving interview. And he was struggling for his words. But he had one idea that kept coming back and back, even as he was speaking about how beautiful and touching and powerful the whole experience of being up in space was. He kept coming back to one detail: the experience of the rocket launching and being surrounded by the blue of the sky, familiar, and seemingly so quickly, the blue disappearing and being out into the endless darkness of space. And he just kept commenting on it, how quickly from one to the other, the world he knew and then the darkness. And he said, of course, he knew that there were other galaxies out there in space and worlds and in infinity, but the way he experienced it was just nothing. And then he would stare down and he would see our planet with the blue, imagining all the life there. And he turned to Jeff Bezos and he asked, well, how high does the blue go? Just a few miles? He said, no, it was, I think he said 10, 12, 15 miles. And then William Shatner said, but it was just a few seconds from one to the other. The blue of the sky and then just space, darkness. And he said, well, maybe that's what death feels like. And then he went on and he thanked all the appropriate people and so on. But it was a moment in the public sphere, coming after this year and a half, the pandemic, and the divisiveness of our times, and everything that we've all been through. And here was another human being, of course a celebrity in front of a camera, but forgetting James T. Kirk for a moment, an elderly man, 90 years old, experiencing the incredible preciousness of our world, of life, and how fragile it is, and how we fail to see it, and how we end up causing each other and our own selves so much pain and suffering. So a few days later, William Shatner gave another interview, and he conveyed that one of the enduring emotions from that whole period was sadness after his flight. Why sadness? Because feeling how precious our world was, feeling worry at the state of our world, the state of our planet, of humanity. So we have those moments when we're reminded what it's all about, how fleeting and important and precious all of life is to all of us. But when that happens, it evokes the best in us. And it wipes away all the stuff that usually clouds our minds and our emotions and our thoughts and our days, and takes us away from this core truth. It's not easy always to get to that truth. It takes some steps to hold on to that ability to see the preciousness of life. That's a journey that each one of us are called on throughout our lives. In some ways, this is the message of our Parsha and the harrowing story that we read this morning. Right? The core story of Judaism, the very foundation of our faith, of what it means to be Jewish, and all that elicits within all of us the story of the binding of Isaac. The final test of Abraham, as we read this morning, as God commands him to take his son, his only son left, the son whom he loves, Isaac, and offer him as a burnt offering. In those excruciating 3 days as Abraham is traveling to obey God's command, all the way to bidding his servants to rest on the side while he continues alone with Isaac. One of the most intimate dialogues in the Torah, as he and Isaac are walking up the mountain, and Isaac asks, "Father, where is the sheep for the offering?" And Abraham answers, "God will see to it, my son." And then the binding, and still Isaac's silence, not hearing his words or his feelings. Finally, the raising of the knife, but then the hurried calls from heavens, "Abraham, Abraham," says the angel, and the miraculous apparition of a ram to take Isaac's place. The final sealing that Abraham is the right man to establish God's covenant and mission in the world. And the story evokes so much, but perhaps its deepest teaching is to mark this experience and moment, that life is precious and God will not ask anyone to do this after this. That life should not be sacrificed for anything. And for all of us, it's also tenuous. At any moment, a family member, a loved one can be taken away from us. And then we wonder, what happened? Where was the wisdom in that life? If only we had a few precious more moments together. And then in our modern reading of the story, perhaps it's the Pshat meaning, the easiest, the simple, the straightforward reading of the story. Abraham is silent as this happens. The divine command to sacrifice his son, silent throughout the 3 days. And we ask, where is Abraham who argued for Sodom and Gomorrah, the evil cities, earlier in the Parsha? But I have come to believe, as my father also teaches, that every step of the way, that in every instant, he was arguing with God within himself. How could you do this? Where is the God of justice? Where is the God of mercy, of compassion? How can you take away all of this? My son's very life. So every moment he was advocating for his son's life, for justice, and praying for the preciousness of life to be upheld and to be protected by the Holy One the whole time. Perhaps we learn most from this story and from the earlier story of Sodom and Gomorrah is a part of being a human being is advocating for the preciousness of life. Part of being a human being is advocating for the preciousness of life with our fellow human beings and sometimes even with God. And seeing the world around us and all that it is going through, its beauty, its preciousness, the preciousness of all of that life under the blue, and holding on to it with all of our being. And then going out and saying, we cannot continue as we did before. We cannot allow this to happen. It is in our hands. It is in our hands. And also about how we lead our individual lives once that we have that awareness. Where we decide to each put our energies, which directions to go in. It was also the last 10 days, the same period, that a member of Parliament in the United Kingdom, beloved across the aisle, was knifed to death while speaking to his constituency by someone from an extremist background that glorifies death. And our reaction to all of it is sadness, is newfound clarity at the preciousness of life, and a renewed commitment to stand by and give what we each can in our own way, not to let all of it disappear between our fingers. How fleeting it all is. How beautiful, but how fleeting it all is. Shabbat